As I said before, the control surface is available if you don't want to go through all the rigmarole of setting things up, and then you can just select it as a control surface and it'll work out the box. But I prefer to kind of assign things myself and create more specific mappings. We won't go too into depth. What I want to do is just show you how we use the software in line with the controllers. So, quick tour of Ableton Live software, just of the interface. Over on this side is our browser. So this is where we can access all of our, again, I'll use that word, native devices, so not to be confused with the company native instruments. They're all your third-party external plugins, but your native device is the stuff you get with Live. So I'm using Suite 8. You can see here that you can tell Live from Suite, because Live is the colourful one, and Suite's the black and white one. So the main difference being that with Suite you get all the instruments. So you literally can buy Suite 8 and go home and write a professional standard track, from composition and sound design to arrangement right through to creating your own mastering chain. So then moving down the way, we saw that was my third-party plugins, and then you've got these browsers. So really, I just use one for my sample library, and then I use one for all my sort of quantized values. And you can see here we've got a range of quantized values, all from like the Logic ones, the MPC ones, etc., etc. So let's create a couple. I was going to give you a tour, wasn't I? So yeah, from the top left corner, we've got a tap tempo, global tempo, nudge buttons here, which is more of a DJ's feature. Same sort of effect as if you spin the wheel on a CDJ. Just temporarily speeds up or slows down the track. You've got your time signature and metronome. So the time signature is automatable, and you can change it in your arrangement. Then you've got your global transport. Then moving along, you've got some really, really important buttons here in the top at the centre. So this is your overdub button. Back to arrangement, which I will come on to later on. And then you've got your global quantized value here. So by default, you'll find that it's usually set to a bar. And I'll explain that as well. Then you've got your punch in and out and your loop brace. Again, this applies more to arrangement mode. Then you've got your key and MIDI assignment modes. So if I wanted to assign a control, I click MIDI, everything turns blue. Then I can select the parameter that I want to assign, and then move a control on the software, and away we go. So this mode is called session mode. If I add a few audio tracks in fact, I'm going to add a few MIDI tracks as well. So I'm using keyboard shortcuts, but if you right-click on any part of Live's interface, it reveals a list of options and reminds you of all the shortcuts that you're doing. So it's handy to get to know them because it just speeds up your workflow, which is what Ableton is really all about. It's all about workflow. There's other things, but Ableton's really fast to work with, and it's creative, and everything happens in real time. So you never have to stop the track to go back and tweak your ideas whilst you're creating. You can just stay in that musical, creative kind of zone when you're trying to come up with new ideas. So over here we've got our send and returns and our master channel. I've got a reverb on my first return channel and a delay on my second one. So if I hit tab or click on this logo up here, then we go to arrange mode. So arrange mode is what most kind of producers are used to using. It's a linear workflow. So you work from left to right like you read a book. This is where we end up with our finished product. We're all aiming, if we're producing, then we're all aiming to have a finished product. And we rely on this arrange mode to have that, because we need things to play the same every time from start to finish. That is our track. That's our product. But this mode here can be used for live performance. This is the non-linear workflow. So what you're doing is, although it's your mixer, these rows are called scenes. And you can trigger a scene by clicking this one over here. And then you trigger all the clips in that row, and these are all clip boxes. So these can contain MIDI information, or if I get a sample and drop something in, then it can audio tracks, clips contain audio, and you see your sound wave. So they're just clips. So what I use this mode for, this session mode or clip mode as it's also known, is just as a sketch pad really for my ideas when I'm creating. So I build up all my ideas, and if you draw the analogy of an artist, then this is like his palette, and then this would be the canvas. So that's the kind of way that I tend to think about it. So I always sort of start making ideas in here. So what I'm going to do is go to my live instruments and drag in a drum rack. Now, I've created MIDI tracks so that you can see the red box over the 8 tracks, and that's what the Launchpad can see. And you'll see how that comes into play in a minute. But what I'm going to do is just show you a perfect example of Live's workflows. I've just deleted 7 tracks, and I want a few drum racks, so I can use this Command D, which is a duplicate shortcut, to just duplicate the tracks. And now I've got 4. And then I'm going to move into my sample library. And if I wanted to, for example, grab a load of samples, there's some chords here that I could highlight multiple samples and drag them in just to a space and drop them, and that's created the audio track for me and put all these clips in there, right? Now, these are all MIDI tracks, and this is your drum rack down in the bottom left-hand corner, so it's kind of like a virtual MPC. So if I just remove that and that, and you can see it. And there's no samples in there at the moment, but what I'm going to do is just show you the process by which I would load up the samples into these instruments. And I tend to sort of use one-shot samples, which you should be able to get a few of, because Loop Masters have kindly donated a sample pack for us, so you guys can have access to some samples if you want to download the demo of Live and use it for 30 days. And you can save your work while you do that. So all I'm doing here is dropping multiple kick samples into the drum rack, and then I'm going to move along to the next one, and I'm going to get some hi-hats. And I'm just going to repeat the process here. So you can see I'm highlighting a lot of samples, chucking them all in. I'm not necessarily going to use them all. I just like to have choice, because there's nothing worse than searching through a sample library, looking for sounds, when really you want to be kind of playing sounds. So this is the way that I program drums, and it wouldn't have to necessarily be dance genres. You could use BFD, and you could use this in exactly the same way. All I'm doing, when you see me doing this, I'm using a feature that's called copy value to siblings, and that's a really, really useful feature, because what it allows you to do, if I get some final one, I'm dragging these in. Now the velocity pads are not, the launch pads rather, are not velocity sensitive. So what I'm doing is bringing the volume of all the samples up to 0 dB. And I've seen people click on every individual sample and set the volume to 0. And that takes a while. So this copy value to siblings just means you can set one and then instantly copy that value to the rest of the samples in the rack. So if we go to mixer mode on the Launchpad now, I can record arm the tracks. So if I wanted to record arm my kick track, this row record arm stuff. So that's what you need to do, as you probably know when you load up a software instrument, is record arm the channel so you can hear the sound. And user 1 mode in the Launchpad just maps itself to the drum rack automatically. So all those samples are just at your fingertips instantly. So I'm going to create an empty MIDI clip just by double-clicking in this clip box. And I'm going to do the same for the first scene in all those drum racks. And then I'm going to show you that if I was to launch the first MIDI clip in session mode, can you see the resemblance of that clip layout on the Launchpad? So on channel 5, we've got all these clips, got these 8 clips. Now, if I was to launch the first clip, now we're playing, and that clip's looping. So you can see that clip going round and round, and if I zoom in to just above the metering, you can see that that's indicating that the loop's going round as well. So at the moment, there's no MIDI information in there. This is why the overwrite button is so important at the top, because if I turn that on, you see how the clip play symbol is red? Well, if I turn off overwrite, it's gone green. And that's because I need to have the track record arm to hear the sample. So I need this overdub button so that I can say, well, I want to hear the samples, but I don't want to record yet. So I turn that off, and now I can play in the samples, but I won't be actually putting them down. So I usually assign, through Ableton's MIDI mode, I usually assign a button in user 1 to that overwrite command. And that just allows me to turn that on and off as and when I want without having to go back to the trackpad on my computer. And the final thing I'm going to do before I sort of start to layer down a rhythm is just to go into the edit menu and look at this feature called record quantization. This was implemented, I would say personally, for live players, guys that can't risk making a little mistake on stage. You know, they want it to be right. So this feature, you select the grid, and if I select 16th note quantization, then it's going to snap every note that I play to a 16th grid. It's a really useful feature for getting ideas down without having to go back in and correct little things that's just going to interrupt your workflow. So now I've got the ability to actually compose a beat without having to worry about what's on the, without having to worry about touching the laptop. So I'm just going to put the click on as I lay the kick down, and then I'll take it off. Bring the volume down slightly as well. So now I can audition which kick I want to use without actually recording the notes. And then when I'm ready, I can turn overwrite on, the clip's gone red, and now we've got a solid, tight kick drum. So we can take that off, and we can go back to mixer mode on the launch pad, record it on the second channel, go back to user 1 and audition some more. Decide which sample I want to use, and then turn on overwrite. I've got to launch the clip as well. See how the clips weren't launched? So just play them all. And now they're all playing, so I'm just going to repeat the process. So you see the next channel's record armed, go back to user 1, turn off overwrite, and audition my samples. So I've just written a beat in about a minute, and it was so easy. And I'm actually using my ears because I'm not looking around in a piano roll, sort of trying to, you know, click in notes and get them in the right place and correct where they're going. I'm actually just playing. So I'm playing live like an instrument now, and it's like playing a drum. It's like playing an instrument, and that's one of the massive benefits of live for me. So the stage we're at now is we've got our first 1 bar groove. So what we can do with that, if we want, is just, if we like that, we can retain the initial idea and use that duplicate command again, and we just copy the clips down. So now we're retaining that initial idea, but now we've got another scene which we can build on. So let's just layer it up again. So just go through there again, and we'll just add some more samples, and we'll just get a few more layers. So I'm going to launch those 4 clips with the launch pad as well. So then again, we've just built up on the idea. So now what we've got, if I move these clips just slightly out of the way so we don't launch these in those scenes, then what we've got is the first idea, which might be the intro beat. And then the next scene. And and I'm introducing some more elements into the beat. And then in the next scene down, we can do the same. So we're already starting to create this sort of this build-up in a track, and this arrangement is starting to take form. So we're going to need more than that, because it's just still sounding pretty sparse. So these audio clips are all just single hits. So the reason that at the moment they'll all be following this global quantized value, and that's why when I launch the next scene down, it waits for the first beat of the bar, and all the clips start at the right point, and they stay in time with each other. And that's crucial in live performance, because you're going to want to launch a clip. You don't want to have to worry about launching it at the exact right moment in time, because there's so much room for error. So you hit it somewhere in the bar, and Ableton will wait for the first beat of the bar and then launch a clip for you. So what we could do is we could set all these to none if we wanted. So we'll go into my launch preferences, which is just down in the bottom corner, which by default isn't open. But if you click on it, open up your launch preferences, and then what we can do is we can set, at the moment it's following the global quantized value up at the top, but we might want to launch these off on the fly. So we could set all these to none, and then I've got the ability to just and then I can trigger them off in real time, just as samples, you know, just like you would on an MPC or on anything like that. So it's all playable. Just wanted to show you that, so you don't think that you're confined to having to wait for the start of the first bar. It's not like that at all. You can set every individual clip to its own quantized value. So what I'm going to do now is just set them back to a bar. No, sorry, set them back to global. I want to show you one of the cool features. It's really useful. You can use it in a few different ways. It's called follow actions. That's the feature. And again, you find it in the launch preferences. So if I zoom in, you should be able to see this follow action section here. Now the way this works is you specify what you want a clip to do after the clip is played. So you drop down the menu or up the menu, and I can select any of those things so that after the clip is played, that's what's going to happen. So if I keep it simple and I just say, right, go to the next clip, and then you look at when it's going to happen. So we've got bars, beats, and sixteenths, right? So if I had it set to a bar, then this will happen. So it's easy to see what's happening. The clip's just moving on after a bar. But what I'm going to do is go for a little bit more extreme, and I'm going to say move on after a beat instead. And then you get this. Okay, and then you can take it even more extreme, and I'm going to say go move after a 16th. And you get this. Yeah? But at the moment, every single clip is starting from the beginning of the clip. So if I click on a clip and we look at the audio, just look at the start of that wave when I trigger that. So we've got all this sound, half a bar's worth of sound, but we're only ever getting the first 16th of it. So what you can do then is highlight all those clips again, and there's a little option called legato, and what that does is it means that if I turn that on, and instead of every clip launching from the beginning, the timeline's going to launch on the next clip where the last clip left off. So it might not make sense in words, but if we watch the audio, now you'll see when the playback meter will be selecting all kinds of different parts of the clips. You just get so much more variation. So we have got more variation because it's actually turned it into more of a 2-bar loop, because we're getting a little fade out on the end as well. So You can try that with drum loops, you can try that with vocals, you can try that with anything you want, and you can get some really good results. And I'm using it in quite an avant-garde way there, because I'm using it quite experimentally. But if you were to use that, say you had 4 different clips of hi-hat patterns, let's do it. Let's go to I think this was the hi-hat channel. No, that was my claps. There's my hi-hats. So I could take that clip, duplicate it, and then create a variation. So let's do that. And then I'll create another variation on that. And then one more. So now we've got 4 different hi-hat patterns. And what we could do then is just select them all, and we'll set them up to go. We'll say, right, we want it to go to the next after 1 beat on legato, but we also want to give it another option just to add more randomization, and we'll say then go to any clip, and then we can set the odds. So if I do that, then there's 54 to 39 chance that it will go to the next clip over any other clip in that block after every beat. And the timeline will follow on. So what I've done is, without having to program any variations, I'm instantly going to get this randomization. So that's another way you can use it. And then you've also got it just, if you just want to set off a simple sequence that you don't have to worry about triggering, and you can use it for that too. So what have we got? If we play this. That's sounding a bit intense, so what I'm going to do is go back into MIDI mode, and I'm going to assign a filter to the control, sorry, to the filter frequency on that. So now I can control this. So now I've got a filter control on that first, on this synth channel here, and I'll rename the track synth as well. Good to keep your projects organised so you don't get confused. And so what was it? It was kick, hats, percussion, and snare. That'll do. Cool. So we've got something coming together. We're going to need a bass line of some sort. So I'll just use loops for time's sake. I enjoy making my own bass lines with synths and stuff, but just for the time being, we'll chuck a couple of loops in and see how that sounds. And what I'm going to do as well is just take the click off, so we don't have to keep listening to that counting. I'm also going to put a filter on the kick, so I can control the kick drum as well. But I'm going to do that on the launch pad, because user 2 mode is left for you to just assign for yourself. So again, just repeat the process, go into MIDI learn mode, click on the filter frequency for the kick, and then I'm going to hold that button there, and then hold that button there. And then that's mapped the range of that row of buttons to the filter. So if I wanted, I could use the end scene launch button just to turn the device on and off. So and you can set that up so you've got LED feedback as well, because that's essential for live performance, because you need to know where all your filters are at. So we've got a little idea building up, and it's in the sort of genre of a sort of deep house track. I'm feeling it's a little bit slow, so I'm just going to speed it up slightly, just to 127. And then I'm going to show you another cool feature. Is a lot of fun to use, again, for all different types of audio. I'm going to use it with a vocal loop. So I've got some vocal samples here. I'm using all Loopmaster samples. I really, really like the Loopmaster stuff. They're high quality samples, and they're good fun to use, and they're really sort of up-to-date sounds as well. So here we've got, if I solo the channel and we have a listen to it. So that's quite a nice little vocal sample. What you can do with that, it's currently an audio wave which we could manipulate if we wanted to. For example, if I copy it, just so I keep that, and then go to the one I've copied, if I wanted to manipulate that, I might say, well, I like that chord. So I've highlighted the chord, and then I can loop it. So again, right click and you've got the option to loop. I could have just hit Command L, or on a PC, Control L. But I'm just going to use that. So we've looped that, and now I'm just going to stretch the audio out using the warping, because Ableton allows you to stretch and shrink audio, and you can create some interesting sounds by doing that. So let's put another warp marker in right next to it, and then let's just stretch that out. So if I undo it, it sounds like this. So I've just really wrenched that audio out, and I could start creating variations of that. So I do this so much because you can just keep the original idea, but then just go mad creating lots of other interesting variations. And then you could set up loads of follow actions on them if you wanted to. You can change the start point from where the loop starts. You can have it play in from a point and then get to a point and start looping. So there's a million and one things you can do with audio. So yeah, I've just created that mental sound out of a vocal just by stretching the audio. Simple as that. But what I'm going to do is just take it a step further, and we're going to take it into the world of MIDI. So the way to do that is just to right click on an audio clip, and then there's an option that says slice to new MIDI track. So if we select that, it's going to ask us, it gives us an option to choose how we want to chop it up. You can chop it up by the transients, which are just these little grey suggestions of where a warp marker should go, of where there's a sudden increase in dynamic in the wave. We could do it by the warp marker, so if you've got an a cappella and you want to take out the words, you can put in the warp markers at the points you want and then slice it out. I'm just going to stick to a 16th note grid, just a semi-quaver grid. So this is it, chopping it up. And then once it's done, is put it in a drum rack, which is the instrument that you saw me using at the beginning. And then we can compare what it used to look like, which is an audio wave, quite clearly, with what it looks like now, which is a MIDI file. So I don't need this audio wave anymore. I'm going to lose it, and I'm going to swap these channels around and stick that on the ends so I don't get confused. And because it's in a drum rack, what that means is that as the drum rack is mapped on user 1 mode of the launch pad, that if I record arm that channel, then we've got it on the launch pad. So I can then play it in how I want to play it. It's a really cool thing to use with drum loops as well, because you can chop up a drum loop and then have each hit. So if you just want to recycle a drum loop, basically, it's a really quick way of doing it, and you saw how quick it was. So let's do a little recording. We'll put some other parts back in. Now if I wanted to maybe put some reverb on it to give it a bit of atmosphere, then I could, because the launch pad's great for that. So you could use a pot or a fader, but on the launch pad in mixer mode, you can control all your volumes. So that's that track. So I can put that in and out as I want. You can do pans as well. And then we can do sends. So that's my reverb send. And because it's in MIDI as well, there's other things we can do to MIDI. We've got the option here now of controlling the sustain and the decay and the attack of all these little slices of samples. So you can really manipulate them live in that way. And then we've also got MIDI effects in live as well. If I wanted to put an arpeggiator on that, and then I could set it up so that it's sending out 16th notes. And we've got a gate control on there, so we can hit play on that. See what this sounds like. Then if I wanted to control the rate of that arpeggiator, again, simple as it gets, just assign a control to it, and then maybe one to the gate as well, so we can manipulate the gate time. And then we've got the ability to and I love using the auto filter just because especially in sort of dance genres, it allows you to just bring in elements and take out elements in a sort of unobtrusive sort of way. So we can put another filter there. So now we can. So we've got loads of ideas building up now. We might just need some effects, maybe. Could just quickly chuck in some sort of effects I have in here somewhere. The nice thing is that you can use your browser and it will always audition samples in accordance with your global quantized value. So if I wanted to audition another drum loop on top of that, I know I can click it, and I don't have to worry about clicking it in time with my session. I can just click it and it'll wait and it'll start at the right point. So let's take the kick out and the snare, which I'm not really feeling at the moment. And then we've got so that I'm just clicking on different loops and auditioning how they sound, and it's a really nice thing to be able to do that in time with your session. But we were looking for some effects, weren't we? I'll get sidetracked. That might do for some sort of breakdown. So what you can do then at this point is you can sort of start rearranging things. You can start arranging things into a fashion that is going to make it easier for you to take it through its paces. So at the moment we've got clips all over the place, and that's fine if you've got a launch pad and you can bring in two clips at once if you like. But bringing in two individual clips with the mouse is impossible. What you need to do is rearrange it and put it on a scene. So say for example we stop everything, and then we have the percussion line and this hi-hat line that's going. If I wanted to create a scene that just had those two parts, those two elements, there's a shortcut for it, which is Command-Shift-I or Control-Shift-I. And what that does is capture and insert scene. So it's just extracted those clips and plonked them in a scene for me. So I could add another part, like the bass line, do that again, and again it's created a scene for me. So I can just move around my set, try things out, audition parts, and start creating this arrangement. Let's add this in as well. So I'm sort of starting to get a feel for how I want the track to go. Let's take out this. You can see how I'm using the session mode just to create a sort of arrangement, really. But what I'm going to do is keep this in the sort of production kind of aim. And then what you can do is you can actually do a live take of your track, triggering all your clips. So if we hit global record up here like that, and we stop everything, we make sure everything's stopped. And then I don't need to sort of sit there staring at arrangement mode, moving blocks around. I'm not saying that that's a bad way of doing things, because once I get to the point where I've got an arrangement, I just stay in arrangement mode then, because then I'm very focused on the finished track. But at the moment, I'm still writing. So the beauty of this is that now I've hit record, I can actually do a live take of my track, and that's what makes Ableton more musical for me as a musician using this software. It's less about staring at the screen and more about getting involved with controllers and hardware and actually doing a take like a musician would in a studio. So we've hit record. Let's bring in these tracks here. So you can use the launchpad to add some reverbs and delays. I've got set up on my return channels. This is just an intro, and then I might want to bring in the bass line. So that take didn't come off as well as I'd want it to, but all I need to do is hit tab, delete that, and just go again. For some reason, I think I launched a clip at a wrong time, and maybe the kick was out of phrase with something, but it's not a big problem because I've got the principle across, and you could go on for hours like that. And then what you've done is you've captured everything. All your automation movements have been captured. All your mutes and solos have been captured. All the sends where you've wanted to introduce a bit of reverb to a sound have been captured. So now that we're in arrangement mode, we can go into these tracks and we can see what we've done. You see all that automation data on the filters and the different parameters that I'd assigned. I think there were even elements there that I hadn't brought in. So what we could do is we could check out this section of the track. 1, 2, 3, 4. Loop that. If I felt that filter came up a bit too quick, then I could easily sort of just move that around, edit it a little bit. You know, just kind of fix it up to get it to sound how I want it to sound, and then we can audition other parts over the top. And it goes on, but the reason I want to show you going back into arrangement mode is because this is what leaves people scratching their heads about live, and it's really important to remember this. This is, for me, where there's a big penny dropped when I learned this, because if you're going to and from session mode and arrange mode, you'll notice that this light comes on up here at the top, and it will go red. Now, if we open up the info view, which is useful if you're learning live, because it just sort of, you hover your mouse over something and it tells you what it is and what it does. If I hover the mouse over here, it says back to arrangement. Now, when you play session view clips or change automated controls, this button will light up to indicate that the current state differs from that of your arrangement. So what you find is, if I see that this vocal line where we've got all that vocal stuttering going on, there's a red dot on my auto filter for that, just here. And that's telling me that that control's automated. And you can see the red line. So if I'm playing my arrangement, well, in fact, we don't even have to be playing it. If I decide I want to move that filter, when I move it, that line's not red anymore, it's gone brown. So that's been withdrawn from the arrangement. So what you tend to find is if this red light up at the top is on, then you're listening back to your arrangement. You can still see automation lines, but they're not doing what they say they're doing because they've been withdrawn from your arrangement. And it's a really key thing to grasp when to understand the relationship between the two modes of Ableton. Because you'll be looking at your arrangement thinking, well, that's not what it says in my arrangement. You know, that's not what's happening. And all you need to do to hear what is actually in your arrangement is simply click that and go back to the arrangement, and then everything comes back. And that's like a sort of protective mechanism to stop you from ruining all the stuff that you've got going on in your track, basically. So, how are we doing for time, Michael? I'm going to open the forum to you guys now, and also to the guys that are tuned in online as well, and just throw some questions at me. If there's anything you want to know about the software, or if there's something that you use a lot, a process that you use whether you're performing or producing, and I haven't explained it, and you want to know how to do it, then please ask me now, because I'll do my best to answer your questions. Yeah.
Can you assign the vocals, okay, the vocal loops to all those keyboards? And can you change the pitch?
Sorry. If you could just repeat the question, because the microphone was slightly late, and I just want the guys that are online to hear the question.
Can you assign the vocal loop into each of those keys?
These here?
Yeah. And then when you're playing each key, can you change the pitch too?
Can you change the beats?
The pitch.
The pitch?
Yeah.
Let's have a look. What I'm going to do is go back into this session, get back into session mode, and I'm going to go and find that vocal sample again, just so we can go from the top. Now, this was the vocal sample I used, so let's drag it into there, and I'll solo that track, just so that's all we're going to hear. Now, one thing I didn't explain before is, if you double click on the channel header, that's when you see your device rack. So say, for example, I added a device. There it is. That's my device rack. If I want to see the audio wave, double click on the clip. That's just a simple navigational thing that's good to know. So, got my keyboard. I can see I've got MIDI notes coming in because I can see I've triggered that because that was record armed, and I've also got a little blinking light up in the top corner. So I can see the MIDI coming in. Now I'm going to slice it to MIDI because in order for me to, unless I just want to trigger a clip, an audio clip, then I want to convert it into MIDI. So we may as well use this one because it's already been done. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to delete what I've got going on in the device rack as well. So let's turn the arpeggiator off, and let's look at this, and let's bring the filter up as well. It's not plugged in anymore. There we go. So the launch pad in user 1 mode starts from C1. C1.
Yeah. So
it's just the same. So effectively the launch pad is like a keyboard, except it's not velocity sensitive. See how I can do that? That's velocity sensitive. Well, C#1 is there.
The C, yeah.
So if you want to change the pitch of a particular slice, or
for the C1, let's say.
For that.
Only for the C1.
So here's the drum rack in which this audio file's been sliced up into. So if I go for this slice here, and then we can go to transpose, which is a little parameter that you get with Simpler, because Simpler is an instrument in itself. This sampler here is called Simpler, because there's a more advanced sampler in Ableton. So a drum rack is just lots and lots of simplers. And in the Simpler, you've got the ability to transpose. So there's C1, So we can choose what pitches those notes are at. If I wanted to move to the next slice and transpose that to something different, and then the next slice and transpose that to something different, and the next slice and so on, then I've just got, yeah? So we're just changing the pitches of each slice, and you can do that for any bit of audio.
So is there any option that you can assign the transport to any of those keys?
The transport controls, as in play and stop and so on. Well, with the 0SL and the impulse, you have dedicated transport controls. So what we can do is, if we were to select the impulse as a control surface, we've got rewind, fast forward, stop, play, loop and record. And we've got the same on here. So there would be no need.
Okay.
But if you wanted to use the launch pad or the nocturne, then you could. It would just be a simple case of going to MIDI learn mode, clicking on the play button, and then pressing a button on the pad. And when we come out of that, we're playing. Yeah?
All right, thank you.
Cool.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Okay. We've got Liam online. Sorry.
Okay.
We've got Liam online, and he's just
Hi, Liam.
wanting to ask you if you could give him some more information on how you control the light part of the launchpad, and then he's given me a bit more information about setting up the lights to give you feedback on the launchpad. He said you mentioned doing it for the filter earlier.
Yeah.
When you assigned a key
Okay.
range to the cutoff.
What I'm going to do, just so that there's no confusion, is just open a new live set, and I'm not going to save this one. Probably wasn't one of my better tracks. So what I'm going to do is grab a filter. So let's get a loop. We'll put a loop in. Let's go for a drum loop. That'll do. Double click it and it's dropped it in there for me. Then I'm going to double click on the channel header, go back to my live devices and grab a filter. There's so many effects in live. They're really cool effects. I haven't had time really today to go into depth in all of them, but they're so much fun to experiment with, and they sound great. But I'm going to use the filter here. I'm going to first we'll assign it. So what we'll do is we'll go to user 2 mode. That's the mode that you use to assign things in. Then we go to MIDI learn mode, click on the filter frequency, and as before, just map the range of that filter by holding the first and last button in the row. Now I can control the filter with the launch pad. So it's only 8-step resolution, but in a live performance for a quick filter sweep, it's ample. Here's the complicated part, and I hope I can remember how to do it, Liam. But what we're going to do is create a MIDI track, because if I remember rightly, the thing that turns lights on and off on the launch pad are note messages. So it's something to do with that. So what I'm going to do is just create 8 empty MIDI clips here. So double click in the clip slot, create an empty MIDI clip, and then use the duplicate command just to create 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, because there's 8 pads on that row. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign the same 8 pads that I assigned to the filter to these clips. So let's do that by just using the down arrow on my keyboard to move down. So now all those clips have got their own button. Now we can come out of MIDI assign mode, and I'm going to go into my MIDI preferences just to check that the launch pad is actually sending messages back out. So I'll turn this on. And then at this stage, the only last thing that I need to do is set these clips to a quantized value of none, because obviously if I want the lights to update to me as I'm controlling this filter, I don't want every pad to wait for this first beat of the bar, because it just wouldn't work. So what we're going to do is set all of those clips to none, and then we go to my input and output preferences, which is just on the right hand side here, and open them up. Now this is really where you would select an input from your interface to record audio. It's where you would select a whole bunch of clips that are going mad doing follow actions to just route to another audio channel and capture it as one clip. So there's loads of cool routing options, but what we're going to do here is just say the MIDI from this channel we're going to send to the launchpad. So MIDI to the launchpad. And then hopefully we'll see something happening. So there's your LED feedback on a filter. So you can imagine if you've set that up, you know, you need that in a dark DJ booth or on a stage, on a dark stage, and you need it to look at the launchpad and at a glance say, look, my filter's down, that's why I can't hear the samples. Bring it up, and that's how you do it. And then the same applies for the drum rack. If we were doing a video and we wanted to look really cool, because it does look cool, you can get samples into a drum rack and you can achieve the same thing. It's not quite as complex, but if we get some drum hits and we'll use some toms, I'm going to drag them in and create a MIDI clip. And I'm going to record some stuff. Same again, just go input and output. And then we can say create a MIDI track. Because these MIDI tracks don't need to necessarily get in the way, because you can shrink the track down just to a little thin slither in your live set. We're just going to say MIDI from the drum rack. So let's come into this MIDI channel, and then because the drum rack turns into an audio channel because it's a virtual instrument. So then we're going to say MIDI to the launch pad, and then you should see. So that's how you get lights coming back onto the launch pad. So it's very, very useful.
There's Ian online would just like to ask if you could give him a bit of clarification between the relationship between the session view and the arrange view, if that's possible.
Yes, no problem.
Sorry, Paul.
So there's no rules. You can use them both together, or you can use them both on their own. If I was DJing with live, I wouldn't touch the arrange view. If I was me personally writing a track with live, I start in session view. It's just the way I like to work. It's not the only way to work. There's so many ways of approaching live. If you wanted, you could say, well, I love Ableton and I want to use Ableton, but I'm not really down with session mode. I just prefer to start my arrangement because that's how I work. So if that's the case, say for example, we wanted to put a MIDI track down of 16 bars, you could highlight a section and you could put in a MIDI clip. Control click will reveal all the options. So now we've got a MIDI clip in there and we can start programming our MIDI line. If you wanted to record audio, you can drop down the audio channel, and all these tracks going down the right hand side are exactly the same as these tracks going along. So this is your mixer and these are all your tracks in your arrangement. And then we could say, okay, external in, I want to record my guitar, so configure that and select the Sapphire as my sound card of my input device, and then we want to record channel 1, so we're recording my guitar into channel 1, and then you can record on the track, hit record, and then hit play. Okay, that's not very nice. What we've done there is recorded a little bit of silence because we've set it up to record, just as you would in Pro Tools, just as you would in Logic. So that's arrangement view on its own if you're starting to work just in arrangement view. You've seen me in the last sort of 45 minutes working with session view. The thing to remember about the relationship between the two is the back to arrangement button. So let's delete this horrible line here and play this. So if I wanted that to go down in my arrangement and I wasn't doing a live take, I just want to sequence it all, just arrange it all normally, then I can click and I can just drag it around and then hit tab. And now I've got it in this mode. So I'm going to drag it into this track and drop it, and then I can start telling it how long I want it to be. You know, I'm gonna sort of get to the point because we will run out of time. So here's my audio in arrange view, and I could turn on my loop brace, and I could work just with this loop here, and that's going to play round and round. So maybe I've put some automation in there. So let's go and find that filter and drag it onto the track that I've just put it onto, which was loops 2. Just drag the filter on there. So where is it? Okay. That doesn't sound like the filter's working. There we go. Did you see how that filter wasn't working then? That's because the back to arrangement button wasn't turned off. And that's really me clarifying the way that the two modes work. If you're working in arrangement, it's best to make sure that that light's off. And the only way it's going to turn on is if you go back into session mode and trigger a clip, or if you move a parameter that's been automated. So let's click on the filter frequency and put some automation in, because we want this filter to come down like that. And then as it's playing, I'm going to move the filter frequency in the device. So you can hear it happening. The line's red, it's reading the automation, and then I decide I want to play around with it, so I'm just going to grab it. Now I can play with it, but when I go back to my arrangement, it's not doing what it said. And then we click on the red light, and it is doing what it said because we're working in arrangement view, so we want that light to be off. So I hope that's cleared it up a little bit. It's a crucial part of understanding the relationship between the two modes. So,
I was just going to offer one last question to anyone in the room. Is there anyone else with a question they'd like to ask?
In which case,
okay.
Let me just close by explaining one thing that I haven't really touched on, and that is Max for Live. Has anyone heard of Max MSP?
Yes.
Yes. Now this is a really exciting concept. It's Ableton, a very forward-thinking company. We are proud to be distributors, and their software works really well with our products. Now, Max for Live, there's a whole community of people out there who use Max MSP to design their own effects and their own synths and stuff like that. And these are all sort of programmers, you know, who can. And some of them are musicians as well, but they all share all their patches. Now, Cycling74, the company who designed Max MSP, collaborated with Ableton to make all these patches that people are designing compatible with Ableton Live. So you can take these patches and open them up as a live device. As you see, the auto filter is there. So if we go into, I've got one that works with the Launchpad that's one of my colleagues at Novation actually designed. And it's like a melodic step sequencer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop analog, which is just one of Ableton Live's virtual analog synths. So that's on this channel here. Oh, I've already got it actually, it's over here, look. And then I'm going to record on that channel so we can hear it. And then onto that track, I'm going to drag the step sequencer, a Launchpad step sequencer. So Max for Live is going to boot up now. Now this is just one patch in a sea of patches. There's a whole community of people out there making all this stuff. So that is not an Ableton Live device, but it is now because Max for Live makes that possible. So what this does essentially is turns user 2 on the Launchpad into, before I hit play, I'm just going to go into the amp envelope and reduce the decay so it's not, the notes aren't ringing on. Now we can hit play, and and you can see what's happening. You can see what's happening on the launch pad. So then what we've got is the ability to control volumes. If I turned up volume sensitivity on the synth, which I haven't, then you've got pans, that's not pans, this is notes, note pitch, yeah? So we've got it was working a second ago, wasn't it? So I've put some different pitches in. I believe this is octave, so we can, and probability as well, so now we can do, that'll never play, that'll play 50% of the time, so we're going to get some variation. Let's do that. And then the one I missed was duration, so we've got, and if we put the beat back in, and we've got a little idea there.
Does that only work with the launch pad?
Yeah, this patch was designed for the launch pad. So that's a max for live patch for the launch pad, but you get so many other really exciting patches that do other crazy stuff that just you know, just inspire you to come up with ideas. And then we turn on the filter on that device, make sure that that drum loop that we've got hasn't got its filter turned on, and we haven't even touched the synth patch yet. We haven't even tried. That's an initial patch, and we've just created a bass line in seconds. And what you can do is you could create a MIDI track so that you don't have to keep running the device. And again, just going back to Live's routing capabilities, we can say MIDI from analog. Record on the track, and then I can start select in as well. I believe it's that. And what analog, wrong analog, this analog, and then I can start playing with that. So. And then what we've done is I'm recording all those variations as a MIDI pattern. So then if I later on decide that I don't want to use analog and I want to use collision or operator instead, I just switch the notes out and I can save that MIDI file and use it in future. So there's some really good scope there with Max for Live. But I've got to wrap it up now. So that's the end of it. But thanks so much for listening, guys. It's been great to come down here, and thanks for everyone who tuned in online as well. So yeah, it's been fantastic.